Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's review, we're going to be jumping over to a couple of sour beers. Two different styles here, both thought to be completely different and unique for the style category they are in, and I did get both beers from Tavour. We're going to be starting today with Ex Novo's Cactus Wins the Lottery. This is a Berliner Weisse that has been brewed with prickly pear added. It's 4.2%. They are based out of Portland, Oregon. And the beer number 2 is from Cellador Ales. This is called the Carrot King. It's a wild ale that's been brewed with carrot juice, and it has been oak barrel fermented. As I understand, Cellador oak barrel ferments all of their beers, which is quite an interesting move for a brewer, as it takes a lot more money and time, and there are a lot more variables that could happen. Nonetheless, this is a 6% ABV, and they are based out of North Hills, California. So two completely different sours, both with something added that ought to make them interesting and unique to try. And I can't wait, so we're going to jump right in. Starting with the Ex Novo, Cactus Wins the Lottery, 4.2% ABV. All right, jumping in with beer number 1 of today's sour review, we have Ex Novo's Cactus Wins the Lottery. It is a Berliner Weisse that has been brewed with prickly pear. 4.2% ABV on this one. Can art, couple cacti driving in their convertible with a longhorn strapped to the grill. So I guess that's how cacti celebrate when they win the lottery. But nonetheless, let's get this poured right in the glass here. All right, got it cracked. That's a nice looking beer. It's got a very light, slightly orangey pink or salmon colored hue to it. It's quite lovely. All right. Yeah, that's a very, very lovely beer indeed. Very bright, kind of orangey pink, salmon color. Looks great. Very effervescent as is expected from a Berliner Weisse. Slightly occluded, as is also expected from a Berliner Weisse. Everything about this, and you'll notice, as is typical with sours, and certainly this falls into that realm, a head may start as you're pouring, but they're very, very effervescent, and it'll get out of the way. It's not indicative of this style. Indeed, you don't want a head on a Berliner Weisse. It's out of place. But this looks great. Let's give it a sniff. Not a super pungent aroma. Really all you can smell is the classic back Berliner Weisse malt base. And you can smell the slight tart and sour come through. But not a super pronounced aroma at all. You can just get a hint of what this beer may be about. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in and give it a sip. Oh, that's very nice. That's very nice indeed. I'm very pleasantly surprised to say that the prickly pear does come through quite strongly. And it pairs very well with this beer style. The natural flavor of a Berliner Weisse really is a good base for adding prickly pear. That goes very well in this beer. It's got a nice, bold, tart sour up front. It's like eating a mouthful of sweet tarts or a sour warhead up front. It's quite pungent on the front. Then that immediately gets out of the way. And this prickly pear just comes to the forefront. It just opens up. Very, very, very good. Very strong, bold, forward flavor. This is a beer style that puts me in mind of a few different beer styles, most notably Goses. There's a lot about this that is similar to a Gose. The intensity of the sour and the tart, the slightly cloudy nature, and the way that the malts kind of develop in the flavor profile here. While this is not a Gose, so it doesn't have that classic toast bread, biscuit crusty nature quite in the forefront. The malt base does have similar characteristics. So I gotta say, in this beer, This story of this one is really all about the sour, tart, and the prickly pear intensity. The malt, you really just get that little hint on the aroma, and it's not a pronounced aroma, and just a hint when you first get it in your mouth, but it's all sour, it's all tart, and it's all prickly pear. Yeah. Just a hint of the malts you can taste at the very, very front when you first get it in your mouth before the sour and the tart opens up. Then that opens up, gets progressively more intense for about 2-3 seconds. Then that gets out of the way and the prickly pear starts to open up, and that gets progressively more intense. And then that starts the steady decline. On the steady decline is when you get that last little bit of that malt back, and it's very nice. It's very clean. The finish on this is not very long. They typically aren't, so I'm not surprised by that, but in case you're wondering, it is not particularly long. This is a very nice beer. I think it's well balanced for a Berliner Weisse. You get the classic style, and you get the fruit, and they weren't shy about getting the prickly pear in there. It's really quite nice. It's a good ingredient to go with this beer style, in my opinion. It's certainly one I've never tried in this beer style. I've had it in other styles, never in a Berliner Weisse, but it works. It's very nice, and it looks great. Nonetheless, I'm going to take my time sipping on this one and come out with my scores. And when we come back, we'll get to our second beer of the day. That is the Cellador Ales, the Carrot King, the wild ale brewed with carrot juice at 6% ABV. Okay, moving on to our second and final beer of today's sour review, we move on to the Cellador Ales, the Carrot King, wild ale with carrot juice, 6% out of North Hills, California. It has been oak barrel fermented, so ought to impart quite a lot of aroma and flavor and add more depth to this. Now, you'll notice I already have a little port here. When I cracked it, it was very effervescent, and it started to bubble out of the top, so I had to pour some in here before I started, or it was going to start spilling all over the table. Further, even just this little bit you can see in here, this is another just absolutely beautiful beer. It is very, very bright orange. It looks great. So the Carrot King indeed. I'm going to finish getting some more of this beer in the glass. Okay, yes, that's ridiculously effervescent. And you'll also notice, much like the Berliner Weisse, it's occluded. You can't see through it. Indeed, it almost looks like an orange New England IPA. It's so thick and dense in appearance and has that cloudy nature. I did also notice one thing on the bottom of this label, which I'll show you in a moment. It says Belgian-inspired wild ale with carrot juice. Not exactly sure what that means. What qualities they believe are Belgian-inspired, but nonetheless, it does state that. Very interesting bottle art. I'll try and keep it away from the glare of the camera, but there's some crazy looking, crazy looking carrots, and I guess that's a king that's maybe drunk on eating carrots. I have no idea. There's like one bucktooth drooling carrot, one with a ciggy in its mouth, and one that just has a crap-eating grin on his face. So interesting, interesting bottle art. I've never seen a beer with a bottle art quite that unique, shall I say. Nonetheless, it looks absolutely stunning. I mean, there is no denying this is a beautiful beer. I can't say as though I've ever had a bright orange beer. I mean, the last one was kind of a peaky orange hue, kind of a salmon color, but this is next level. I mean, this is bright orange beer. I am certain that the camera is picking that up, and it's very effervescent. No head, perfect for sour style, so let's give it a sniff. Wow, that smells pungently sour. And you can smell a little funk in there, which is very typical for a wild ale. Wild yeast, hence the name wild ale. So it's not a controlled, it's not like using Hefeweizen or something like that. This is wild, naturally occurring yeast that just does its thing, and that's what imparts the funk and the sour and the tart. It's one of the reasons wild ales are so much fun. You never really know what you're going to get. They're all different. And I am very much looking forward to jumping into this one. I'm going to give it one more sniff. And you know what? You can actually smell that oak barrel on there. It does impart some kind of woody back to it, which is very typical for oak aging. But I'm going to jump right in. I can't wait. Oh, oh, that's intense. Very pungent sour. Very pungent sour. Then it opens up into tart and it opens up into sweet. In tandem with the sour, before it opens up into the tart and sweet, you start getting this massive funk that comes through. Puts me in mind of Brettanomyces yeast. That's very much what this reminds me of. But yeah, very effervescent for the mouthfeel, as you might expect. I'm going to jump back in just so I can pinpoint the body, and I'm going to go through this full finish as well. Body's medium light. Absolutely opens with very sour. Opens to tart, slightly sweet, and a bunch of funk in between. From there, it starts to take on kind of a fruity nature. I don't know what fruit. It almost tastes like berries to me. Maybe a mix of raspberry and strawberry, though there's clearly none in sight, not brewed with any. But that's just the flavor that's coming through. Oh, it's so good. Yeah, berries maybe mixed with melon, like cantaloupe or honeydew, mixed with berries. Even just kind of has a slight hint of a blueberry flavor. It's like blueberry, raspberry, strawberry, honeydew, and cantaloupe. If they all kind of joined together and had a little party in a beer, like that combination of flavors. Even though none of those are in this beer at all. It's a carrot juice wild ale. It's imparting these fruity flavors like that, and it's so good. I'm very surprised by this beer. And I'll tell you, I'm not even a fan of carrots. I don't particularly like them. I can eat them raw if they're julienne, but or if they're cooked in a stew or like a pot pie. But in general, I don't go for carrots. But I had heard this beer was very special, and I would agree. This is a really fantastic and special wild ale. The way that it develops the flavors that it actually does develop, and certainly appearance-wise, I mean, this beer is just freaking off the chain. I don't know what else to say about it. This is a seriously cool beer, and I'm really enjoying it. If you're a fan of wild ales, if you're a fan of sours, you're a fan of a little funk in your beer, and kind of taking a sensory and flavor ride, this one's absolutely for you. This is a very good beer indeed. I'm going to take one final sip here just to get final thoughts. Pungent, pungent sour, funk, tart, sweet. Starts to develop all these fruit flavors, which none of them are in there. Actually, I even just picked up like a hint of banana. This beer is all over the place. This is a big, complicated, dense, exciting beer. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. This is a really fun beer, and it's so enjoyable. I haven't enjoyed a wild ale. Oh, it's been quite some time since I've enjoyed one this much. I mean, I generally have an idea of what I'm going to get when I get in a wild ale, but this one is just full of surprises. If you're a fan, I highly recommend it. If you're not a fan and you just want to try something neat and unique and different, I highly recommend it. This is one that I absolutely will stand by as worth seeking. Unless you absolutely hate any hint of funk in a beer or you absolutely hate sours, if that doesn't apply, seek this out. This is such a cool, exciting beer. I am so glad I got to get my hands on it. I'm going to take my time, finish sipping on this one, come up with my scores, and we'd come back we'll get both beers rated from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to go through and get them both ranked. Starting with the Novo Cactus Wins the Lottery. This is the Berliner Weisse brewed with prickly pear. 4.2% ABV on this one. They are based out of Portland, Oregon. The aroma on this one was okay. It was on the low end of average. It gets a 4. Taste-wise, I enjoyed it, but honestly, as pleasantly surprised I was with how strongly the prickly pear came through, it rather drowned out the classic Berliner Weisse traits, and I just would have liked a little more even balance of flavors in there. I'm still above average. It gets a 6. Rather high end of average. Body was textbook Berliner Weisse. Couldn't ask for more. Gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Same thing for the mouthfeel. I mean, this was a very, very well done Berliner Weisse. Really, the only gripes I had were nitpicky elements. Mouthfeel gets a perfect 10. Finish on this. This is one of the nitpicky areas. Berliner Weisses don't typically have a particularly long finish, but this was rather brief indeed. And it made it a lot more challenging to really experience the full scope of flavors and senses that were, hitting all your various senses: smell, taste, body, mouthfeel. Beer is a full sensory experience. And when the finish is so short, you don't get to delve completely deep in the beer, and it doesn't get to fully open up and do its thing. I would have liked a little more length to there. It gets a 7 out of 10 for the finish. Head and retention, super effervescent as they tend to be. Did not form a head as they tend not to do, and that's indicative of the style, so it gets a perfect 10 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was an absolutely stunning beer to look at in the glass. It was this beautiful, bright, pinkish orange, kind of salmon hue, and it was lovely. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. Balance. Balance comes back to where my gripe was in the taste category. Just a little too prickly pear forward, not enough of the base Berliner Weisse malt that came forward. It was there, it just got drowned out by the additive. I still gave it above average. I gave it a 7. Feeling in the intangible, it gets a 7 here as well, and it's for the same reason. I did really enjoy this beer. I just had a few little nitpicks that if it could have been balanced better. It all comes back to the balance. Balance is so key in beer, and this was a good beer, but it was just a little unbalanced for me. 7 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, excellent Berliner Weisse. Excellent idea with adding prickly pear, and it certainly was lovely. But again, balance. You got to have a balanced beer. It really does affect multiple categories, and this was another one. It is a good example, but it's not top tier. I gave it above average. It gets another 7. So that brings the total score on Novo's Cactus Wins the Lottery to a 78 out of 100. Certainly well above average, well worth seeking. I did enjoy it. Just a couple minor nitpicks that just ended up domino affecting and affecting other categories, bringing down the total score. Moving on to beer number 2. This is the Cellador Ales, the Carrot King, a wild ale brewed with carrot juice out of North Hills, California. This is 6% ABV, and it was oak barrel fermented. The aroma on this was quite pronounced. Wild ales tend to be a little more pronounced, but this was above average for a wild ale even. I gave it an 8 out of 10. The taste on this, you got all of the classic wild ale flavors that came through. Very pungent sour, very pungent tart, some nice Brettanomyces-like funk that came through. And once it moved out of that and burst forth with just the intensity of the sour and the tart, the flavors that came through were just insane. I did not expect. It was blueberry, it was strawberry, it was raspberry, it was banana, it was melons, it was honeydew, cantaloupe. It was really, really interesting, and I was not expecting that, and I absolutely loved it. I give it a perfect 10 out of 10 for the taste. The body on this was a textbook wild ale. 6%, kind of in the middle range for a wild ale. They can run the gamut from lower ABVs to really high ABVs. This kind of sits neatly in the middle. It had a wonderful body for the ABV and certainly for the style. I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel. Another very effervescent style, and this is very typical. They don't feel particularly viscous. This one certainly did not, and they are very, very effervescent. and how that effervescence imparts mouthfeel in wild ales can vary from beer to beer depending on how fine the carbonation bubbles are. This one had an interesting mix of large, medium, and small, so it felt more effervescent than it did creamy, and you know, that's really typical for the style. I really enjoyed it, and it was nice to roll around the palate. I give it another perfect 10 out of 10. The finish on this was very nice. Certainly much longer than your average wild ale. Not as long as some that I've had, and certainly with the oak barrel aging, I would have expected that oak to bring in some quality to the kind of extension of the finish as oak barrel aging and fermenting typically does. It was there, just not enough to kick it up to top tier, but well above average. It gets a 9 out of 10. Head and retention, another just like a Berliner Weiße. It's a sour, very effervescent style. Shouldn't form a head, didn't form a head. That's perfect for me. It gets a 10 out of 10. Appearance-wise, this was another one that just blew me away. I have never seen that brightly orange of a beer ever. The depth of color on this was just ridiculously bright and beautiful. There's no denying it was stunning to look at in the glass. Perfect 10 out of 10. Balance, this was a beautifully balanced beer. You got all of the intense classic sour, tart, and funk that you expect from a wild ale. And then the carrot juice added not only color, but it added these depths and layers of flavor that interplayed with the sours and the natural flavors that come in from the yeast strains. And it just went all over the place. I mean, talk berries and melons and tropical fruit and sours and funk and tart. I mean, you couldn't ask for more, and you could taste it all. This was a wonderful balanced beer. It gets a 10 out of 10 for me. Finally, moving on to the last two categories, feeling and intangible and example of the style. I gave them both a 10, and it's really for the same reasons. I absolutely loved it for my subjective, the feeling intangible category. As an example of the style, it was top notch. This was just a fantastic wild ale that had a lot of twists and turns and very pleasant surprises I didn't expect, and it's a slam dunk. This is one of the best wild ales I've ever had. That brings the total score on the Cellador Ales, the Carrot King, to a 97 out of 100. This is another one of those that this is among the top rated beers I've reviewed to date, and it absolutely earned it. This is just a world-class wild ale. If you can get your hands on it, I do recommend it. I got both of these beers from Tavour. Ladies and gentlemen, that's today's sour review. As always, I really do sincerely appreciate you tuning in. As always, please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so. That'll keep our videos in your feed. Like always helps the channel, and it helps others find us. And comment. Please let me know what you think, what you like, what you dislike, any questions you may have, suggestions. Let me know. I am here for you. If you want to keep in the loop and know when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the notification bell. It's right next to the subscribe button, and it will let you know right when our videos go live. But that's a wrap for today. Until next time, folks, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.